ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, ay, ay. Wir haben sich alle zusammengekommen. A Movie zu machen soll uns wohl bekommen. Die ganze Mischproche wird von das lernen, von wannen wir kommen und von wem wir stammen. The new generation, it's important to show. If you don't know from where you're coming, you don't know where to go. Of our dear family, we are very proud. So this film comes to say it out loud. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, ay, ay.
The family moved from Romania, and they all had different stores in Bathurst, Dalhousie, and Campbellton. We couldn't wait to go to Campbellton. We loved and I loved your father's broiled salmon. It was amazing, and those romance books in the house. They were.
He did all the cooking.
Yeah. Uncle Mo, and he sewed. Uncle Julius sewed.
And
he
my
was a
mother
sewer.
baked bread Wednesdays and Sundays.
Yes.
Oh, the bread was
And they made
fabulous.
jam.
No, but you had a maid there. You had a maid there that made donuts.
Marielle.
That made
Marielle.
donuts. And she
And
couldn't
they
get them out of fast enough.
I just had to say that before you leave. There's more things.
And
but,
they also shipped food to Israel.
This I
What was
didn't
the
know.
story of my mother? The food almost didn't come in time to go to Israel. There was a boat waiting for the canned goods that my father was making.
Uncle Julius used to can the goods. Uncle Julius used to prepare the food for our grandmother, who was living in Israel, and there was at the time there was a shortage of
I think
meat
it was in the 1940s.
in the 40s, right after the state was declared.
My parents were married in 1930, and they came from Romania to Canada in 1935. And as everybody has been speaking about their families and their parents and so on, what was very, very special is when I was a little girl, I was born in Bathurst, New Brunswick, and in 1935 we were there, and in 1946 we moved to Montreal. And one of the highlights I could remember very, very clearly, as I see some of the cousins here, and I know Sandra has left, is that my parents did something very special, especially something my father was a brother-in-law. And what I remember about him, how he was really treated like a brother. Uncle Morris, Uncle Joe, Uncle Isaac, Uncle Jack, and Uncle Miriam, and all of them, they all loved my father as part of the family. And I remember as a little girl going to Dalhousie and going to Bathurst and going to Dalhousie, Campbellton, Edmonton. There was a little funny story in Edmonton. They had a store. And in order to get into their house, you had to go through a window. From the store, we went into the store, and I had to climb through the window to get into their house. I will never forget that. It was very, very humorous, and we always
Was
had
the house behind the store?
Yeah.
Is that why?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then when we wanted to go back, we had to go back the same way. If I recall, right? There was no other outlet. There was no outlet at
There
all.
was, but nobody knew about it.
Nobody knew about it, and it was very interesting. But the nicest thing was the relationship with which I grew up, the importance, which I'm trying very hard to instill in my children, is, as all the cousins are saying, is how the brothers and sisters loved each other, how they really cared about each other. I'm not sure, Menu maybe could correct me. I know my father built a mikveh in his house. I don't know, is it true Aunt Joanna had one too?
Yes.
Oh, so
Yeah,
that
exactly.
I didn't know about it. And my father also had a shul in City Hall for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but I don't know if the family from Edmonton came, but Campbellton and Dalhousie did
we
come.
didn't come.
You did not come.
Yeah.
So I remember that was an important thing. But one of the nicest things were also in New Brunswick part, growing up there, was Wednesday and Sundays. Wednesday and Sundays were card games. And we remember as little kids, we couldn't wait till everybody from Dalhousie and Campbellton and Edmondson came, and we used to go to the beach. There was a beach called Y'all Beach, and my mother made her delicious, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, menu, you could help me, buchtels.
Yeah.
They were cherry and they were blueberry hot dog ones, roly-poly ones, and everybody couldn't wait to eat the different delicacies that my mother had made.
Good cook.
What? She was an excellent cook. They used to play cards, and we
I used to
all
love to go
what?
to your house. I used to love to go to your house because the food was so good.
Okay, and so that was another thing of we always got together. We couldn't wait to be with all the cousins. My sister reminded me something very interesting, which I didn't know. We got kosher food from Montreal, and she remembers my mother and father waiting at the train station. We had a very big freezer in Bathurst, New Brunswick, and all the food and the hot dogs and the chickens and the borscht and so on came. And she remembers how it was so important how we got that kosher food.
You know, one of the things that I really enjoy, that we all continue to enjoy in the family, the women in the family, every year, twice a year, we make noodles. We make homemade from scratch noodles. My mother was such a lovely lady that, and I don't know if I would have been quite as honest as she was, never took credit for the recipe of the noodles. And I see now that she's gone, when we went through all the recipes that she had in her kitchen, it says Bertha's egg noodles. So she gave the credit of the recipe to my Auntie Bertha. And every year from the time I was a little girl, it was always noodle day or noodle night where all the women would get together, and we still do to this day. And I remember being a little girl, I used to get so aggravated because my older sisters are significantly enough older than me that I was a little girl. I mean, I was 4 years old when one sister got married, and 6 years old when my sister Rona got married. And so they used to say to me, go get the eggs. That was my job, to go get the eggs. I was dying to be standing at the oven making the crepes. And so that's just something that happens in the family, and I imagine will continue through the generations. We line up like we make a production line, and one person is in charge of doing the mix. These days it's my sister-in-law Karen. I stand at the stove and make the crepes. One of the daughters takes the crepe after it's finished to the table, and then the people at the table sit and cut the crepes into noodles. And I always make sure to take extra care to include my little Emma Jo, who has this identical situation that I did with my sisters. We always make sure to include Emma Jo for more than just going to fetch the eggs. That's that story.
Was a beautiful girl, and Uncle Morris met her, fell in love with her, and married her, and brought her back to Canada.
All within 6 weeks.
All within 6 weeks.
Yeah, and he bought an apartment building at the same time.
Right. He already had money because he had arrived in Canada and had been working for years before Mom and Dad got to Canada. Anyway, from then that's where we came to the duplex.
Okay, let me continue with that duplex. The next thing I remember about that duplex is waking up once in the middle of the night, and I saw it was light in the hall. Now in those days we didn't have regular furnaces or anything like that. It was Quebec heaters. And it was up against the wall, and the wall was on fire.
Oh boy.
It caught on from there. We had a buzzer to upstairs, so that I woke Dad up. He pressed the buzzer. Uncle Myra came running downstairs. They took buckets of water and they threw it on the
put the fire out.
Put the fire out before the firemen got there. That's one thing. The next is the mention about cars and our automotive transportation those days. Now, Dad and Meyer were running a business, and thank God, I think they were
Doing well.
quite successful. However, they were not the type to spend money needlessly. So
Waste not one.
right. So what they did, Uncle Izzy bought a car first new. When he finished with it, he sold it to Uncle
Andrew
Julius.
Regina, right,
Yeah.
Uncle Julius and Andrew.
When they got finished with it,
They,
Dad and Meyer bought it in partnership.
right,
Now, we were already, each of us had a fair family, so what we would do when we traveled to Campbellton, which was 16 miles away, we would, their mom and dad and Uncle Meyer and Auntie Bertha, so they would have room for one more passenger. So we took turns between Shawnee, Menu, Julius, and myself.
yeah,
We
I don't remember
rotated.
that.
Yeah, I remember that.
The Uncle Julius, and there's a lot of other stories of Uncle Julius too. He decided that we never have a chat. There's no refrigerators, and you couldn't send food with refrigerators, not like today. And there happened to be a ritual slaughterer that came to Campbellton, and he says, I'll buy some sheep, and we'll have them slaughtered ritually, and we'll be able to eat them. So he goes to the farmer and he buys 10 sheep, and they slaughter one, and then you have to blow up the lungs to see if the lungs are perfect, and then, or else you can't eat them if they're not so they're not ritually permitted. And the first one, Uncle Julius blew it up himself. There's a hole in that one, no good. Try the next one. Hole in that one, no good. One of them had 3 or 4 holes, no good. After cutting 4 of them, after slaughtering 4 of them, Uncle Julius says, "That's it. It's not meant that we should have lamb. We'll have to."
I'll go on with that one too. When Felder was there,
Yes.
Gedalia Felder was there. He was also a
for my
Schreiber,
family.
and we went again. Uncle Julius and Emmanuel and Harold and myself and Felder. We went. He bought calves this time.
Calves. This is so funny.
And we went out. And we slaughtered them ritually, and they were all perfect. And then on the way home, Uncle Julius stopped at a store, and he sold all the hinds. And he says, "I got more for the hinds than I paid for the whole thing."
You see, the reason he had to sell the hinds is
We're not allowed to eat
because you have to know how to take off the veins out of the hind part, and it's only certain people that are capable of doing it. And so, since you can't make them kosher, so you sold them.
I remember once Uncle Julius bought a flock of sheep, 14 sheep, and he called my father and Uncle Morris, and he said, "I bought a flock of 14 sheep from a farmer in New Carlisle, which was across the river from Campbellton," and he says, "Braziver is coming," he says, "so we're going to shech, and we're going to have lamb for the winter."
Wow.
Manuel and Harold Litwin, myself, I think Layne Dalfen was with us, and Julius also. We all went together. We went on the ferry, and we crossed over to New Carlisle. When we went chef, we were very young. It was quite traumatic, actually, because I remember it was quite gruesome. In any case, he made a deal with a local butcher, that the local butcher would take the hinds, and anything that was trafe, and everything in the forequarters we would take. Anyhow, we went into this large farm, this large building. They slaughtered the 14 sheep. There were meat hooks hanging on the side, and they hung them all up. And I recall when they opened up the sheep and the sheep inside were covered with big warts on the inside, on the stomach and so on. Great big black warts on them. Anyhow, Shoichet said they weren't kosher. They were treif. 4 were kosher out of the 14. So the other 10, of course, the other butcher took. And I remember how he said, "What am I going to do with 14 sheep?" He was hoping only to get the hinds. But I remember that was an occasion that we had there. Out to the country when my parents were already moved to Montreal. And on Wednesdays and Sundays, I would go to visit Auntie Regina from Bathurst. I would come up and I would spend that time there. Anyway, I come to Auntie Regina. Auntie Regina had a wonderful, wonderful crock, a real crock for beans, and she used to make beans.
Hash.
And they, no, not hash. Hash is a different story. Anyhow, she made like the Boston baked beans and tomato sauce. So she asked me, do I like beans? I said, yeah, I like beans, sure. So she gave me beans. Anyhow, I come up once, twice, every time she's making me beans because she knows I like beans.
Once.
Well, I like beans once. But anyhow, she continued to make me beans until I almost didn't know what to do. Until one day I told her, Auntie Regina, I hate the beans. And that's the only time that she quit. Bocher in Europe goes to a yeshiva, and they used to eat teig, days they would call it. What did it mean? It meant that you were in a yeshiva, and they used to send you to eat. One day you ate at this woman, one day you ate at the next woman, one day you ate at the third person, and so on. Every day you ate in a different place. Anyway, this guy gets off the train, he comes into the yeshiva, Rosh Yeshiva meets him. He says to him, how long have you been on the train? He says, 2 days. He says, you must be very hungry. He says, yeah. So he says, go next door, he says, to Mrs. Goldberg, he says, and she'll give you to eat. So the yeshiva bocher goes in, he goes in, and Mrs. Goldberg is cooking at the time, and she's cooking beans. She says, do you like beans? He says, yeah, I like beans. He sits down and he eats those beans, he is so hungry. She says to him, would you like a little more beans? He says, yeah. She gives him more beans. Anyhow, he finishes eating, he goes back to the yeshiva, and the next day they send him somewhere else. Somewhere else, Mrs. Felstein. She talks to Mrs. Goldberg. She says, I have this yeshiva bocher coming. Do you know what he likes to eat? He says, I don't know what, but I know he likes beans. So she makes him beans too. And so it goes on the first day, the second, and the third, and the fourth. It's the fifth day, and every place he goes, all they're serving him is beans. On the sixth day, he comes into the house, and they lay down, they put them in front of him with that beans. And he's looking, and he's looking, and he's looking. And the lady says to him, she says, what are you looking so much? He says, I'm trying to figure out what brocha to make. He said, what brocha? You're a yeshiva bocher. You should know what a brocha. He says, look, he says, if it comes out of the ground, he says, you make a barde priyadona. He says, if it comes from a tree, you make a barde priyadona. He says, if it comes from your stomach, he says, I don't know what brocha to make. I said, in Yiddish, it sounds an awful lot better.
I remember about that duplex is waking up once in the middle of the night, and I saw it was light in the hall. Now in those days we didn't have regular furnaces or anything like that. It was Quebec heaters, and it was up against the wall, and the wall was on fire.
Oh boy.
It caught on from there. We had a buzzer to upstairs, so that I woke Dad up. He pressed the buzzer. Uncle Myra came running downstairs. They took buckets of water and they threw it on the
put the fire out.
Put the fire out before the firemen got there. Yeah. Talking about Uncle Myra's, once they moved to Bathurst, I think it was right after, I went out and we decided that Uncle Myra was going fishing. So he left Menu and Julius and I, who were sitting like on a dam with the water
Beaver
going
dam.
Beaver dam, whatever.
Yeah.
And Uncle Myra was fishing around the corner. Anyways, I caught my first fish. I got excited. I fell into the water. Uncle Meyer was at the other end. He saw what happened. He dove into the water to get me. In the meantime, he hit his head on a rock when he dove in. I fell in. I bounced right back up, and I climbed on the logs of the dam, and I got out. I got out before he did.
Oh.
And then I remember went to the store. I got a new outfit of clothes for that.
Living in the country was a real experience. I think it was actually a real opportunity when we think back about it. The food, the air, the closeness of the family. The family was all situated in around the Bay Chaleur in northern New Brunswick. Auntie Regina lived in Campbellton, the Dalfens lived in Dalhousie, we lived in Bathurst, the Hutmans lived in Edmundston, Uncle Lizzie and his family lived in Grand Falls.
Uncle Joe was also in Edmonton.
Uncle Joe was also in Edmundston, right. And the holidays or the time off from the stores was on Wednesday afternoons and Sundays. These were the days when the store was closed. And we cousins would always meet together at one of the uncles. So one week it was at Auntie Regina's, and the next week it was at the Dolphins, or they came to Bathurst, or whatever.
Yeah, Hull
And
Beach and Bathurst.
What?
Yeah, Hull Beach and Bathurst.
Yeah, and
And
Maple
Dalhousie,
Green
Maple
Beach,
Green,
on
And
the way.
PQ Beach in Dalhousie.
In Dalhousie, right. And
And Regina had a cottage there too. At
in Maple Green.
Maple Green.
In Maple Green, she had the cottage, and it was wonderful for us cousins, where we really cemented our relationships and became very, very close. It's something which is unfortunately very rare today, because today everybody moves away. Even children move away from parents, and cousins move away, and so they really many times don't even get to know each other. We were fortunate to have that closeness.
You remember when we were in Hamilton and 5 of us slept in one bed? You, Julius, and I slept one way with the feet going one way.
Yeah.
Manuel and Harold were the
Yeah,
other. with the
we
feet
always
towards
slept
us.
head to foot. It was always, yeah. Notice, our loving cousin Murray has arrived. We couldn't find him till now, and now he came back. And he's gonna- Menachem Mendel, that's right. and hopefully we're going to get some input from him too into this stories. You know, we're talking about a short little funny incident. When Mom and Dad came to Dalhousie, they rented a house which was owned by the Winchesters. Mrs. Winchester, you know, we never gave the Goyim very much credit for brains, and Mrs. Winchester was a very, very nice woman, but she wasn't the smartest. My mother used to tell me always, she used to go to visit people who were sick and dying, and she would stand near them and she would say, "Poor man, you're dying, eh?" Yeah. It's so sad. It's so sad. And I remember how we used to laugh about how she.
You're talking about the Winchesters. You know that your brother Julius was born in that house.
Yeah.
In Dalhousie.
Yeah, I know.
We didn't have a hospital in those days. So Julius was born
Oh, I
in
gotta tell them
Dalhousie.
the story of
I went to
Popeye.
Campbell. I was born in Campbell. My kids were the first ones who were born actually in Dalhousie Hospital.
I must tell you the story of Popeye. Uncle Morris and Dad were running the store in Dalhousie. One day, one of their farmers that used to buy in the store comes in, and he comes over to Uncle Morris and he says to him, "Mr. Dalfen," he says, "my house burned down," he says, "I lost everything," he says. "The only thing that was saved was our cow, and his name is Popeye.
Oh, yes.
And we're making a raffle, and we want you to buy a ticket." So Uncle Morris and my father had a consultation. They invested 50 cents, and they bought a ticket for this cow. Sure enough, the next week, all of a sudden, this guy shows up, and what has he got? He's got a cow, and he's got a rope attached to it, and he's at the store. He says, "You won." and so they had the cow. Well, my father and Uncle Morris were not exactly, they didn't exactly didn't know what to do about it. So Morris looks at my father, and my father looks at him, says, "What are we going to do?" So my father says, "What do you mean what you're going to do? Call Julius." That's Uncle Julius. I mean, Uncle Julius used to be a butcher in the old days.
Shut the cow.
So they called the Uncle Julius and Auntie Regina in Campbell. So Uncle Julius says, "It's no problem. Brezever will be here in another month. Mit Schechten the key, and we'll have meat for the winter." Fine. Brezever was the traveling shochet. He made 2 trips a year. He came once in the fall and once in
It
the
was
spring.
Russian and Yom Kippur. He
Yeah,
happened also.
yeah. So he came to the towns. Now, not everybody had freezers in those days, but there was a big
Gray's.
dairy, Gray's Dairy, who made butter and cheese and ice cream and so on. They had lockers like a post office, and they used to rent out freezers to people. You'd go in, you'd pay so much and so much, you got a key, and you had a freezer. So everybody, and we all had freezers because we never always had access to kosher meat. So Uncle Morris says
They were ice boxes. not
no, they were
freezers.
freezers. They were actual freezers.
In what year?
I don't know what year. Well, you're asking me dates. Anyway, I just want to continue with the story. So Uncle Morris says, "What are we going to do with the cow for the month? Till he's going to come." He says, "What's the problem?" He says, "Go to Furlock." Furlock was the neighbor who had a barn and so on. Give him whatever it takes to do. Let him feed the cow, and at the time we'll do it. Now this cow, the reason they called him Popeye was because he had only one eye. And he was black and white, and like my mother says, dark. You saw all his ribs, he was so thin and so on. Anyhow, they boarded the cow at Furlots, and they paid, and anything. Got the geholpen, Brezever arrived, they were going to kill the cow. Anyhow, but the cow was so trafe. They found the stomach full of a metal junkyard. It was. They couldn't do anything with it, and that was the end of the story. With the
ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון, בשובך לציון ברחמים.
One of the things that the grandparents put forward was that you had to help your relative, and if they helped in Europe, and then they helped the people who came over, and then when our generation got hit and we had a relative who needed help, then everybody got together.
I was just going to say that
right.
They instilled the Bobbin Zeta. I don't know who it was, the Bobbin Zeta, but somebody instilled a closeness with all the family.
Right.
That one was for one was for the other.
Right.
There was no such thing as they ostracized someone. They could have had fights with the in-laws, or they could have had fights with brother-in-laws and son-in-laws, but nothing stopped the brothers to be together and the mothers to be, and the aunts to be together, sisters to be together. They stood together.
One person at a time talking, or it's going to go.
They stood together like a rock of Gibraltar, actually. When one wasn't in trouble, I remember my late father had his first heart attack in Val-d'Or. And he was.
Okay,
you can tell your story.
I just want to hear his when his father was in Val-d'Or.
So he was sick. He was very depressed. Uncle Izzy, Uncle Morris, and Uncle Joe came up. I still remember this. I was only 8 years old, and they took a train. It took 25 hours in those days to come up to Val-d'Or. They came up. And the difference between my father after he saw them was just unbelievable. But just unbelievable. They stayed there for 2-3 days and then they went back. But how many family would you see doing these things? It's unbelievable.
But as you know, your Auntie Regina was a dynamic individual. She loved her pinochle game with her brothers because that was a favorite. We all know that. And she was a peacemaker. She wouldn't allow her brothers to argue in business. She made sure that everybody was on an even foot. And we had an Auntie Miriam who didn't have as much as the others had. And Bertha was getting a mink coat, and I'm sure Auntie Celia and Auntie Sarah already had mink coats.
Auntie Celia didn't have a
Oh, Auntie Celia didn't have a mink coat yet.
No, and she made one call to Uncle Joe.
Okay,
And they got
and my mother called Uncle Joe,
Right.
and she said, Miriam doesn't have a mink coat.
She would
And
like that.
Bertha's having a mink coat, and I'm going to get a mink coat. And so therefore, Miriam needs a mink coat. Make it happen.
And it happened.
And it happened. And my mother would call and say, Miriam has to go to Israel for a visit.
Right.
Joe,
Yeah.
Izzy, Morris, make it happen. And they made it happen.
So she was a wonderful
She
spokesperson.
was a great spokesperson.
I want you to know, Uncle Joe said, Regina, my wife Celia hasn't got a mink coat. She says, so Aunt Regina answered, but if your wife would want a mink coat, would she have one? He said, so Uncle Joe says, get her the mink coat. She had gone to Miami. They paid her way to Miami, and she came back and she wanted to go to Israel. Or it might have been the reverse. So Auntie Regina again said, Miriam would like to go to Israel. So he said, okay, we'll send her. But you know why he sent her? Because Auntie Miriam took care of him when he was a little boy. When you have 9 kids,
Yeah.
you have the older one taking care of the younger one, and it works like. And Uncle Joe was taken care of by
Auntie
Auntie
Miriam.
Miriam, yes.
She was like a second mother to him.
That's
Exactly.
it.
Well, you know the story of when our store burned down, and it was very, very tragic. It happened at the end of January, I believe in the year 1947 or 48, I'm not quite sure, and it was devastating to look at. You came, everything that they had worked for had ice from the water being forced on it, and there was nothing left at all. And what did they do? The family got together, all the brothers and the sisters. Well, we're going to help Regina and Julius now. They weren't youngsters. They were probably, well, my mother must have been almost 50 years old. My dad must have been 56, and they started from scratch. They started all over again with help from their siblings. They got loans. They paid them back. They built a new store in a new section of the town. And it was the way of the family. You always helped the one who was in trouble. That was what you were supposed to do, and that's what they did. In the
Club.
second generation, in
the
our
Cousins Club
generation,
had done
we
that
did
when
it
somebody
too.
can't
Right.
afford,
That's
and
right.
a cousin or
We
somebody
started a
is
fund.
sick, we start a fund. We have a
fund.
Cousins Club. Everybody puts in money to the Cousins Club
Yeah.
to help support
It
the
still
person who
exists,
can't
by
manage.
the way. There's a little bit of money in there, not a lot. There's a touch of money in there.
I want to add one thing.
Yes.
Right before you got married,
Yeah.
the last payment was made.
For that my parents
Yeah,
owed.
and your mother says Baruch Hashem, which means thank God that I am now free of
And
any
to
debts.
make my wedding, they cashed in my father's insurance policy for $3,000. So you should all know that my lovely wedding, including 16mm pictures, was done for $3,000.
And really, it as a someone who married in, I find it very important that everybody, the children should know of the closeness and the charity that was done. And this is what I have tried to instill in my children. And it really is a wonderful family, and I'm glad I'm part of it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I wish. Then when we came to Montreal, there was not a day, especially a Shabbat or a Yontif, where my mother waited for her brother's phone calls. Uncle Joe, my uncle, my Yossele, my uncle Isaac, Uncle Morris, those were her brothers. She couldn't wait to hear from them. And if they called a little too late, she was worried something is wrong. I can't understand that they didn't call me. Another incident occurred with the brothers, and I'm just trying to think. Yeah, Pesach, Layne, the Uncle Joe's family was the family that came to our home, and you wanted to relate something which was very nice, which I didn't know about. We couldn't wait till Uncle Joe's family came every Passover to our home. And what did you want to say?
No.
It was very nice.
No, I was thinking to myself in my youth, the difference between, let's say, having a Seder today, where it's more tedious today. In my youth, when I sat at that Seder, where Julia sang and Menu sang, and then they had a race. Elu Hotzi Hotzi,
Yeah.
and then
She
it
remembers
was
more
so much fun that I dreamt about coming to your mother's house for Pesach. And then what's very memorable, because I love cooking so much, okay, was your mother's stuffing. She made this potato stuffing. Everything, there was something very special about your parents, because your father had a fairness that he was so straight and so fair, and your mother had a twinkle in her eyes, and there was tremendous camaraderie in your family.
Yes.
Great camaraderie.
Yes, and it's very true, and it's nice to hear also other stories, because I was younger and I hear, not much younger, but a little bit, and how Hanya remembered that. And then there's another special thing about how we all grew up under Roche Street, Hutchison Street, McNider, and
Nelson.
And Nelson. And we used to...
Hutchison.
I said Hutchison,
And
and Villanova, right.
Well, that Esplanade.
But I remember really the Hutman family and Auntie Sarah's family, those two, and Uncle Morris's family specifically. We were all very walking distance, and I do recall Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I remember we didn't fast, maybe we were little, and we would go over for chocolate cake at your mother's house. Auntie Dinah maybe had some roast chicken. Enjoyed each other. We played marbles. We played bolo bat. We played. I remember we used to, on the street, we made a hole and we played with the nuts.
And you know how many nuts I took away from your family? Your mother called, she wanted to bake, and the nuts were all gone because I had won them all.
So it was a special feeling of cousins growing up together.
I remember that my mother or father told me a story that one of the children or two of the children became sick when you were little kids.
Oh, yes.
And there's a story about the train rides to come to Montreal.
Yes, that's a very...
Could you tell that story?
I know a little bit, but I think my brother must have told it. Yes, my older sister Shani and my brother Menu, they must have been 2-3 years old when they came to Canada, and they got polio. And it was
got polio in 45, 46.
45, 46.
That's when
Okay, go ahead.
No, I
Go
don't
ahead.
think so.
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because they came to Edmundston.
I thought they were very little.
They came to Edmundston because the Jews in Bathurst did not want them to attend the shul that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and they came to Edmundston, and my father put mattresses on the floor, and the kids, all boys and girls together, slept on the floor in the living room, dining room, and the grown-ups had the bedrooms.
Okay, so that's interesting to hear, but I want to tell you, it's very interesting what Layne asked. It was very sad for my parents, and they literally couldn't walk, and it was called in those days, I think they were like in a sanitarium, is that what it was called? And would you know? Sanatorium?
Yeah.
And they couldn't, no one was allowed to visit them, and Menu remembers, my brother told me, he said it was awful. He couldn't even be in the same room as his sister, Shani. And my father, that's how the story of Rabbi Kramer, is interesting, because he's part of he's not really our family, but we adopted him as our family, Rabbi Layne Kramer, and everybody used to call him for questions, and they were good friends, and we used to ask him to pray for us. And my father sent letters and letters and prayed that they should walk again and walk again.
It was polio.
It was polio. And I think Emmanuel might correct 2 years later, only they walked. It was
of Auntie Regina and Uncle Julius. When I came, I met Auntie Regina. I think this was the first simcha which I attended in the Dalfen family, was the first simcha of of their wedding, of the first wedding of their children. And since then, I am happy to be associated. In graduating till last week, I became an uncle myself. Still will reach the same stage than you have done today. My friends, today is a special day. It's a special month. It is the month of Chodesh Elul, which is a Chodesh Rachamim. And I feel that getting together so many people at such a wonderful simcha, and Torah says, first in the Kuvet Achsani, you have to start in honor of the place where you are. And I'm telling you, I came in, I am always a very oft-heavy pushki, and the tzedakah pushki should get bigger of happy occasions. And today is one of the occasions. And as everything is Basher, it's in your house, it's in your land, I hope and wish that you and Izzy should have the same nachas and joy from your children as your parents have from their children.
One more thing that's really important that I have to say, none of us has touched upon how the family continued to Florida. And that was also very special. Everybody wanting to be together. And it started off originally at the Sovereign Hotel when my father bought it, and how they loved when Nettie and Abby came, and Uncle Isaac. They all stayed there at the beginning. Then they went fancier places, but they all stayed there at the beginning at the Am I not correct? Uncle Morris, Uncle, I don't know, maybe not, yours were parents maybe were in
They were on
another
James Street first.
No, they had their own.
Oh, first the Crest.
That's right.
No, but they continued. They continued
Yes.
to go, and they all played cards, and they kept cousins together and family together, and that was special. And how they loved everybody, from the cousins to Nettie, and like here, just to see for an example how two not in-laws who came into the family who were also fond of Bella and Gail, who are here today, who know stories, and that shows something.
Oh, wow.
I'm Bella Lehrer. David Lehrer was my husband, and he was the son of Miriam Dalfen Lehrer. Oh, she's becoming emotional.
Okay.
And there are many things to be said as a someone who came into the family. I have never seen a closeness that this family had. The brothers and sisters would do anything for each other, and to me this was something very special, and I tried to instill in my children, Jack and Debbie, the same closeness that they had, and also that the charity that was given, that, you know, should be carried on through them. And as I said, I married into the family, and my mother-in-law was Miriam, who was an exceptional person, a person that was ready to do anything for anybody. A vivid memory, I'm sure that everybody, like they mentioned, the Sovereign. My mother-in-law used to go to the Sovereign, and there was like a few stairs and a little balcony on top. And everybody knew that Miriam Lehrer was sitting there daily saying Tillim.
Psalms.
Psalms. And it was a wonderful memory, because there wasn't a person who didn't know that Miriam Lehrer sat there and said Tillim.